1 hour. That's the timeline the President of the United States just put on the complete destruction of a sovereign nation of 90 million people. Not a vague threat issued through a spokesman, not carefully worded diplomatic pressure designed to be walked back the next morning. Not the kind of ambiguous statement that foreign ministries spend weeks parsing for hidden meaning. A specific operational claim delivered on camera in plain language with a casualness that should send a cold shock through every government, every military command, and every foreign ministry on the face of this earth. Donald Trump said it directly. He looked into the camera and said, "We could destroy Iran, make it uninhabitable forever in 1 hour. We could deal with them by today. In fact, within an hour, they would literally never be able to restore this country. We have weapons that can do that." 6 sentences, 90 million people, 1 hour. And here's the most important thing you need to understand before anything else. He's not wrong about the weapons. That's what separates this from ordinary political bluster. That's what makes this statement different from every other piece of inflammatory rhetoric that gets said and forgotten in the daily churn of news. The President of the United States is not exaggerating the capability. He is accurately describing it, and he is threatening to use it. That distinction between a boast and a technically accurate threat is the entire story, and almost nobody is telling it that way. Let's start with the hardware, because the hardware matters. The United States maintains approximately 1,500 deployed strategic nuclear warheads. That number doesn't include warheads in reserve storage. That's just the ones sitting on delivery systems right now, ready to launch. A single Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine, one vessel, one crew operating silently somewhere in the world's oceans, at this moment carries 20 Trident II D5 missiles. Each missile can carry up to 8 independently targetable re-entry vehicles. Each warhead carries a yield of between 100 and 475 kilotons, depending on the configuration selected. Let's put that in language that means something. The bomb that destroyed Hiroshima, the weapon that killed between 70,000 and 135,000 people, that flattened 5 square miles of a city, that burned shadows into concrete. The bomb had a yield of 15 kilotons. 15. The warheads on a single Trident missile carry yields of up to 475 kilotons each, and there are 8 of them per missile and 20 missiles per submarine. One submarine operating right now somewhere in the Pacific or the Atlantic could on a single launch order deliver a destructive yield to Iran that dwarfs every nuclear weapon ever detonated in the history of warfare combined. And there are 14 Ohio-class submarines. So when Trump says we could destroy Iran in 1 hour, the physics and the arsenal support the claim. Tehran, Isfahan, Mashhad, Tabriz, Shiraz, Avaz, every major population center, every military installation, every piece of infrastructure, gone. Not damaged, not degraded, gone. Replaced by fire and fallout that would persist, as he correctly said, for generations. The word he used was uninhabitable. In nuclear strategy, that is a technical term. It means contaminated soil that cannot grow food for decades. It means groundwater that cannot be consumed. It means a landscape that continues killing long after the last detonation. What happened to certain islands of the Marshall Islands after American nuclear testing in the 1950s? Land that the United States government officially acknowledges is still contaminated today, 70 years later. That is what uninhabitable means when applied at the scale he described. He knows what the word means. He used it deliberately on camera. Now, let's talk about what happened in the 60 seconds after those words left his mouth. In Beijing, an intelligence analyst flagged the statement and began drafting an assessment not about Iran, about the United States, specifically about what kind of country makes nuclear threats in casual television language, and what that means for every security commitment America has made to any nation since 1945. In Moscow, a communications officer began compiling the clip for distribution. Not because Russia feared the threat, but because Russia had just received the most valuable piece of propaganda it has been handed in years, delivered free of charge by the American president himself. In Pyongyang, in Tehran, in Islamabad, in capitals across the Middle East and Southeast Asia, the same process began simultaneously. Analysts assessing, generals briefing, leaders asking the same question: what does this mean for us? The answer to that question is different in every capital, and every answer makes the world more dangerous. And let's start with Iran, because Iran is the stated target. The intended effect of this kind of threat is submission, compliance, the psychological pressure of American military power communicated in the starkest possible terms, forcing Iranian leadership to calculate that resistance is suicidal and capitulation is the only rational choice. That is not what happens. Here is the strategic reality that every serious analyst of Iranian politics understands. Iran's nuclear program has always been driven by a factional debate between those who argue that acquiring nuclear weapons invites American and Israeli military action, and those who argue that not acquiring nuclear weapons invites American and Israeli military action. For 20 years, the faction arguing against nuclear weapons has won those internal debates partially on the grounds that American red lines are somewhat rational, somewhat proportional, somewhat constrained by international opinion and the rules of the global order the United States itself constructed. Trump just handed the pro-nuclear faction inside Iran the most powerful argument it has ever had. The argument now writes itself. America threatens nuclear annihilation whether you have nuclear weapons or not. The president himself said he could make Iran uninhabitable forever, today, within an hour. The only rational response to an adversary who states that openly is to acquire the one weapon system that makes that threat too costly to execute. Nuclear deterrence. The same logic that kept the Cold War cold, the same logic North Korea used to survive, the same logic Pakistan used when it felt existentially threatened by India. Every Iranian official who spent the last decade arguing against nuclear weapons just lost that argument. Not because the military situation changed, but because the American president said the quiet part loud on camera in a sentence a child can understand. You want to talk about accelerating Iranian nuclear development? That sentence did more damage than any covert operation, any sanctions regime, any diplomatic pressure campaign. It handed the most dangerous faction inside Iranian politics a recruiting tool that will be used in internal debates for the next 20 years. Now, let's talk about Kim Jong-un, because he's watching this more carefully than anyone. North Korea's entire strategic posture for 3 decades has been built on a single premise. The United States will remove the Kim government from power if it calculates that it can do so without catastrophic cost. The nuclear program exists not to attack America. It exists to make the cost of American regime change unacceptably high. Kim Jong-un did not build nuclear weapons because he wanted to conquer South Korea. He built them because he watched what happened to Saddam Hussein in Iraq and to Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. Both leaders who gave up weapons programs or never developed them. Both leaders who ended up dead at the hands of governments the United States supported or enabled. And he made a rational calculation. Trump's statement to Iran just confirmed everything Kim has ever believed about American intentions. The American president looks at a country he has a political dispute with and describes casually on camera the nuclear capability available to destroy it within the hour. Kim Jong-un heard that and learned nothing he didn't already know, but the rest of the world watching heard it as validation of exactly the strategic logic that drives nuclear proliferation. The lesson every non-nuclear state with security concerns just received is not comply, and you will be safe. The lesson is comply, and you will be safe until the political situation changes and a new president decides otherwise. The only guarantee of sovereignty against a country that describes nuclear annihilation as a scheduling matter is a deterrent that makes annihilation reciprocal. That is the proliferation logic that the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was designed to interrupt. And that logic just received the most powerful endorsement it has ever had from the most powerful nuclear state on Earth. Well, let's talk about Russia, because Russia just won something without doing anything. Vladimir Putin has spent 4 years constructing a diplomatic and media architecture around a single argument. American power is unpredictable, hypocritical, and outside the rules it demands others follow. He has made this argument in Africa, where American interventionism is remembered with more clarity than it is discussed in Western media. He has made it in Southeast Asia, in Latin America, in the Middle East. He has built entire information infrastructure, television networks, social media operations, diplomatic relationships around the sustained delivery of this message. The message has had varying degrees of success depending on the audience. Skeptical audiences required evidence. They required specific examples. They required moments where American behavior was so nakedly at odds with American rhetoric that the contradiction could not be argued away. Trump just handed Putin the clearest, most undeniable, most easily distributable piece of evidence that argument has ever had. Not a disputed intelligence document, not a claim that can be fact-checked into ambiguity. The President of the United States on camera, in his own words without ambiguity or qualification, describing nuclear annihilation of a sovereign nation as an option available to him today, within the hour should he choose to exercise it. Putin will use that clip for a decade. In every forum where American leadership argues that Russian behavior violates international norms. In every negotiation where American diplomats cite rules-based order. In every conversation with a developing nation weighing whether to align with Washington or maintain strategic distance, the response will not require argument. It will require a screen and a speaker. Now, let's talk about the Allies, because the Allies are the part of this story that has the longest consequences. Japan does not develop nuclear weapons. South Korea does not develop nuclear weapons. Germany, Australia, the Netherlands, Belgium, Norway, none of them develop nuclear weapons, despite having the industrial capacity and scientific expertise to do so within years if they chose. They don't develop nuclear weapons because they operate under the American nuclear umbrella. Because the United States has made security commitments that include extended nuclear deterrence. The guarantee that an attack on an ally would be treated as an attack on the United States, with all the weapons the United States possesses available in response. That guarantee has strategic value only if it comes from an actor whose behavior is predictable, whose doctrine is stable, whose use of nuclear weapons is understood to be constrained by consistent principles rather than the moment-to-moment calculations of a single individual. Trump's statement today did not just threaten Iran. It communicated to every ally operating under the American nuclear umbrella a piece of information they are now incorporating into their strategic assessments. The person controlling that umbrella describes nuclear weapons the way he describes construction projects, casually, specifically, with a timeline. That is not the communication of a reliable guarantor. An ally notices. Japan is already in a domestic political debate about whether its pacifist constitution and its reliance on American security guarantees are adequate for the security environment it actually faces. That debate just received new material. South Korea has a domestic constituency that has argued for independent nuclear development for years, suppressed largely by faith in American security guarantees. That faith is now being stress-tested in a very visible way. Australia, Poland, the Baltic states, every country that has built its defense posture around the assumption that American commitments are stable and American doctrine is predictable, all of them are conducting the same quiet reassessment, arriving at the same uncomfortable question. What exactly did we buy with our alliance? And does it still cost what we think? One final point, the most important one. Every person alive today grew up in a world shaped by a specific taboo. The taboo that nuclear weapons are not usable weapons, that they sit at the edge of human capability as a reminder of what is possible and a warning about what must never happen. That the leaders who control them understand at a fundamental level that they represent not military options, but the end of the project of civilization. That taboo is maintained not by law, not by treaty, though treaties exist, not by physical constraint. It is maintained by culture, by doctrine, by the accumulated weight of every statement every nuclear-armed leader has ever made, communicating that these weapons occupy a different category. That taboo just took damage, public damage, documented damage, damage in the form of 6 sentences spoken by the man who commands the largest nuclear arsenal on Earth. The taboo may hold. The institutional constraints around American nuclear use remain significant. The military chain of command, the procedural requirements, the political costs, none of that disappeared today. But taboos that take damage, especially public damage from the most powerful actors in the system, they don't recover automatically. They require active repair. They require the explicit, credible, sustained communication that the damage was an aberration, that the underlying commitment is unchanged, that the threshold remains where it was. That repair requires the person who caused the damage to do the work of undoing it, and nothing in his behavior suggests that work is coming. 1 hour, 90 million people, uninhabitable forever. The president said it, the cameras recorded it, every capital on Earth processed it. And the world that existed before those 6 sentences were spoken does not exist anymore.